Excellent. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is a meeting of the steering committee of the Vermont Climate Council. Thanks for joining us this morning. It's nice to see everybody. We have an agenda. Let me go ahead and drop it in the chat. That may or may not work. Hang on a second. Give me 1 second. Let's try something else. Try that. In any case, I'll share my screen with it. Monday morning, everyone. Here we are. Okay, so we've got this work we want to do. And the key things here are a final review of this report, and Jane's going to say a second why this is not linked in this agenda, but we will be looking at it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about subcommittees and the guidance that you all as the steering committee have for subcommittees for this year. We're going to do a quick 5-minute check-in on anything we want to do differently in today's public meeting based on last week's, and then public comment, and then we're done. Any quick questions before we dive into this? All good? Okay. We do need to approve minutes, so I'll give folks a moment to click through into these. These are the minutes from last time. Does anybody need an extra moment here with our meeting minutes? Any concerns with them? Okay. All right, hearing no concerns and no requests for more time, let's call them approved. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so Jane, let me stop sharing.
Yep.
There's been a little technical snafu and not being able to load this up onto the website, but I think you're going to try to share your screen with the final changes based on council feedback, right?
Sorry about that. Liz Amler was on vacation and now she's out sick. And admittedly, after doing this for years, posting documents, I can't remember how anymore. So I will get this up later today, but had no assistance. So what I'm sharing on my screen is a track change version of the report. I thought it would be most helpful before PDFing it for me to walk you through the edits I made to the document last week in service of the comments that you all had at the last council meeting. So I'm going to do that. If I can move you over so I could get to my mouse. Okay. There's not many, so bear with me as I scroll. I'm sorry. Okay, the first big edit was rate one of the comments. I won't have the comments in front of me, so David, if I miss anything, just let me know if you're looking at them. But
Okay.
one of the, if I remember correctly, one of the comments that you all made was you appreciated the summary of the priority recommendations in the climate action plan. And because this year's work was really focused around the update to the cap, you wanted to move that right up into the intro of the of the report to the legislature. So I did that. I added a sentence at the beginning, just recognizing that most notable this year is a discussion on the update to the climate action plan, which is discussed below in the report, and then took verbatim below that the summary that I had put down lower in the plan about the priority recommendations, which in large part is verbatim language from the cap itself. So and let me just say to you all, since this isn't posted, I will run through it. And if there's any concerns, happy to hear them now. This will get posted today. So I should say that. And then from there, we still have a handful of days till the end towards the end of the week, the 15th, when this is actually due. So if there are any lingering concerns or minor edits, I'd be happy to take them and could share out a final if that's helpful for people. If there's any need for that, we can talk about that today. So that's the first edit. Again, sorry, there's literally like five big things, so hopefully the scrolling won't get overwhelming. I added in a sentence to the overview that spoke to the droughts, which was a comment that our summary had really focused in large part on flooding. And since we were living through the droughts, to add in a sentence. Capitalized initial instead of lowercase. Think the next big thing here, yes. Okay, I added in a sentence ahead of, you may recall there was discussion about including all the bills. Commissioner Johnson was concerned, like, why do we show all the bills, even the ones that don't get enacted in the legislative session? As was normal course, we left all the bills that had ties to the climate action plan, but added a sentence that just specified that we were showing all the bills, whether or not you all were supportive of the efforts or not. So just wanted to caveat that. And I think the last big section is in large part related to the climate spending chapter or language around climate spending. And I'll preface that we've been working really closely with the Interagency Advisory Board. We had a meeting to the Climate Office. We had a meeting back in early December with the with the IAAB to discuss the final climate spending report for this year, which I used that report to pull in the language around spending that we did for the first time in last year's legislative report. Um, we were very explicit. There had been some confusion about how we deal with one-time funding. Just to be clear, the climate spending report is that it focuses just on new spending in the state budget. And so if we had shown one-time funding in the previous year's spending document, we wanted to remove those dollars because even if they hadn't been drawn down, it was a misrepresentation of like new funding, and we wanted to be very clear about those definitions. So there's been some adjustments made to the climate spending document. And I have sent that out to the IAAB. All staff across all agencies have reviewed those definitions, retooled the numbers there. So it'll actually look like a decree, like a smaller number in state spending, because much of that spending has either been reverted, like solar for all, through federal action, or hazard mitigation funds only showed in, which would only show in last year's budget, not in this year's budget. So we're still finalizing that in large part because Liz supports cleaning up all those numbers from staff and then creating the tables that you see here. And so this is something
Just
that
scroll down a bit. Just
this is something that we would finalize once Liz is back in the office this week. So I deleted it here. I made a note of how you all would like me to represent it, and then to be very clear that it is reviewed, looks like there's more mitigation funding than resilience and adaptation, but that's in large part because much of that resilience and adaptation funding shows as one-time funding in last year, and the smaller pots of mitigation just are ongoing funding sources.
can you
So I
just
will clean
scroll a
this
bit?
up and we'll be sure to share again the final report before it gets submitted, just in case people have any red flags or concerns with the way funding is represented. And I'm pretty sure that was the last big suggestion that you all had. Yes, my apologies. The last thing I added in, you'll recall I had a placeholder for a summary on the amendments that we are moving forward with Advanced Clean Cars 2 and Advanced Clean Trucks. The secretary is just returning from vacation. This was a summary that we used for iCar and then boiled down in response to questions from the administration to be clear and succinct around why we're doing these amendments. So I added this language that moved forward with the public package around our rulemakings, which we're meeting with ICAR today, actually, on these amendments. So this was a big ad, and know that I would like the secretary who's just returning from vacation to make sure she reviews this because we just had a placeholder for that for advanced clean cars. And then I added in a link, which is hard to see with the track changes, to the final memo from the Climate Council to the legislature on the greenhouse gas reporting program request, and then the letter of support from the Climate Council. I can,
Okay,
again, we'll post this and ensure that there's time for review specifically from our secretary on this one, and then from anybody else on all the comments, obviously. I'll leave it up for 1 second, but more than happy to drop it if folks have additional comments. David.
great. Okay, thanks. All right, so this seems to, address those things we talked about in the meeting. I think the only thing I didn't hear, Jane, that came up was this idea of like how you allocate funding between mitigation uh, versus resilience. I think there were, if I remember correctly, I'm just going back to the notes. Um, right.
Well, I just mentioned that. Sorry, David. I
Yeah.
mentioned that I needed to, once I had the final numbers, just be clear about sort of why, how the funding, why it looks like there's so much more for mitigation than there is for resilience.
Right. Right. So there was a request for a little bit more
Yep.
clarification there. Okay.
And there was one more comment that I'll just drop sharing. One more comment from Chris Campany. I forgot that I didn't mention this, and I should. There was a comment about Chris Campany, and if you have those in front of you, David,
Yeah.
that I consciously chose not to put in, and I want to check this with everybody. He wanted me to add it under the Municipal Climate Toolkit summary, and it felt very ancillary, and so I made this executive decision that it didn't fit there. If you want to bring it up, David, and folks feel strongly, we can find a different place to put it. But the comment, the way the notes were written was he made a comment about
Alberta?
yeah, and it just didn't fit with the climate toolkit, which is a specific ask in the Global Warming Solutions Act to our office to create the climate toolkit, and that was a summary of the work done around the toolkit, and that wasn't quite fitting. Oh yeah, there, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Jared?
If folks have a direct response on this question, happy to go there. I was more just raising my hand because I want to go back to something else, but
Okay.
pause to see if others have something on Chris's request.
Yeah. Does anybody feel very strongly about this?
This
Jane's
feels
feelings?
like this
Yeah.
is a report on the Climate Council's work to the legislature, and this is like a separate bill. So
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Doesn't sound like there's strong feelings about this. Jared?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for making these changes, Jane. Overall, I think they all look good. One nuance that I think that I was trying to convey when we talk about the balance of spending or investments in terms of mitigation or resilience is not just the kind of clarity on the numbers as they kind of move and change and trying to pin them down. I think it's also trying to I would be most comfortable being clear that there's not a clear, bright line oftentimes between mitigation and resilience. And many of the things that had been bucketed as mitigation could equally be bucketed as resilience or something else. I mean, I think of weatherization, which, yes, it has a pollution reduction benefit. It also has a resilience benefit in terms of keeping homes warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer, and a health benefit. Um, and there's lots of other things in terms of panel upgrades, in terms of um, some of the investments on the electricity side and so I just worry that somebody would read this and say like, well, we're doing a lot more in one category than another category when a lot of times they're they're investments that have multiple benefits across categories. And I just think I want to have a little bit of kind of I want to make sure that we're signaling that there are not clear bright lines between these categories all the time, and that sometimes investments and resilience also have mitigation benefits and vice versa.
Great. Thanks, Chair. I see Jay in the chat's like, yeah, let's do that. So it sounds like an agreement coming out of here is let's put a line in here that describes the fact that there aren't necessarily clear, bright lines, and there may be dual benefit for some of these, even though it's categorized as one thing. Okay, that's great. Anything else in terms of final here before this gets sent off? Okay. All right. So just to be ultra clear about the process here, folks, when this gets posted on the online and later today, folks can take a final look at it and send an email to Jane or, um, you know, I think the tricky part here is, if everyone's just comfortable with Jane having the final say on, the final little bits and bobs that get done, as long as you all sign off on that, then this is fine. Otherwise, we have some complicated process in front of us of like another meeting or something. So I'd want to hear you all as a steering committee say, yeah, we're fine with how this is looking, and it's okay if Jane does little bits and bobs to finish it up. I think that's the key here. Yeah, I see some nodding from Liz and Kelly. Okay. Julie, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I just the point Jane made around the Lev Zev piece, I'll need to take a look at, and can flag for folks if it ends up being more substantive, although I don't think it will be.
Got it. Right. And the key there is it's just aligned with what's actually happening with with the process, right? Okay. All right. Anything else on this before we move on to the next topic? Are we okay? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. All right. So the next thing that we were going to look at was the guidance for subcommittees. And here, um, it could be different for different subcommittees, right? I think co-chairs are looking for some guidance. Kelly, maybe you want to say a little bit about just transitions is looking for. I think going into this, the conversations I've had with some of you about this is there's actually not a lot of work for subcommittees to do this year, substantive work, with the exception of perhaps just transitions doing something maybe, right? And science and data doing something maybe, right? But otherwise, substantively, we're not asking things of the subcommittees. But I want to test that with folks, um, and have you all as a steering committee provide a little guidance. I wonder, Kelly, if you want to just say a word about sort of what you're hearing in just transitions and what you think might be helpful for them.
Yeah, real quick. I think we were maybe one of the, I know for sure that we've been like, hey, what should we be doing? And we've been putting off meeting at all, because we weren't sure. So yeah, just I guess, is there anything in particular that the steering committee would charge us with over the next year? And a couple things seem pretty obvious, like we should keep abreast of what's going on with any public engagement and things like that. But other than that, what are we all thinking for just transitions? And then yeah, I think the other subcommittees, it might be a little bit of a different question because there isn't, they're the ones generating the content for updates and things like that. So yep, that's you summed it up really well, David.
Okay. What do folks think? What guidance do we want to send out there? Liz, Joey,
Oh, and I think
Julie,
I'm not sure I
Jane.
said this explicitly, but like frequency of meetings, I know to some extent we set our own, but if there were strong feelings among this group of, oh gosh, if we went, if you only met once a quarter, that wouldn't be often enough or something like, if
Yeah.
there's feelings about that too.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like we're in, like you indicated at the beginning, kind of, a period of less activity. And don't feel fully qualified to speak about your committee, having not attended many of the meetings. And if I were thinking about it from the committees I have been on, it would be like maybe a meeting after the public meetings are done, since that's so relevant to the work that you're doing. And then probably a pause so that it is more quarterly, no more than, unless there's another like more public facing, community facing event that makes it necessary. So that's how I would look at it. And I think similarly for at least the cross sector committee, it's more about just sort of seeing what happens in the legislature, staying enough on top of it so that we can be, conversant when next something happens. But otherwise, I do think it's a bit of a pause, other than perhaps science and data.
Could we talk about science and data for a sec? Like, Jared, what are you thinking would be helpful here?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there are some things that are ongoing where science and data plays a role in terms of review and feedback of the annual greenhouse gas emissions inventory. I don't foresee nearly the kind of frequency of meetings that we had in the lead up to the cap, but I think that there are some ongoing meetings. The other thing that I'm thinking about is, and there are multiple reasons for this, some that could not be controlled. There was a tragedy with Taylor. There was contracting delays. But I think we can all agree that it was really not ideal and really problematic to have so much of the modeling work that was supposed to underpin and inform the development of the cap not come in until the very end of the process. And so, you know, to my mind, working backwards, if the next cap is due July of 2029, I think we want to make sure that we have all of the background modeling complete in 2028 to inform that process as it gets underway, which I think means um, that 20 mid to end of 26, it makes sense to have conversations about what is the modeling that we want to see happen in support of the next cap, understanding where we are, what the tracks are, and have most of that work happen in 2027. So I think it is a lower frequency of meeting and less intensity of meeting than it has been. But having the experience of the last cap and how much things snuck up on us and how much things kind of stretched beyond timelines, I think we want to make sure that that does not happen again. Um, so, I'm curious, Jane, and anyone else's feedback, but it feels to me like we want to make sure that, we don't have a repeat of what happened this last time. Um,
Yeah. In the interest of time right now, could I do a quick summary of what I think I'm hearing, which is on the substantive subcommittees really are in a dormant state right now. And maybe perhaps they can join. Hey, Dylan, could you mute your mic? Um, uh, it- so those like cross-sector and rural resilience and ag and eco, maybe what they do is they could join a council meeting where we update the council on what happened in the legislative session, if we do our June meeting, something like that. I don't know. Something where they can stay in the flow of things by joining or just listening in on council meetings. For just transitions, it sounds like maybe coordinating with Sophie and thinking about the public engagement is going to happen and how just transitions could be helpful in that kind of engagement. Maybe that's the path. And for science and data, it's like putting a rhythm. Maybe you make a schedule that really goes all the way out to 28, 29, and say, these are the things we want to do. And you all can figure out like, okay, we'll meet twice a year this year, and then we'll meet, whatever it is. Does that feel like a fair summary of where we are? If I was clear, sorry. Like I'm not sure the substantive ones, cross-sector and rural resilience and Agnico really need to meet, but they really might enjoy sitting in on a council meeting, for instance, in June when we're going through what happened in the legislative session and how it all shook out, right? I don't know, Liz Miller, if that's aligned with what you're thinking. Okay. Does that does that work for everyone, Jared?
Yes, it just makes me think that if for, over the next year, the main opportunities for counselors to be getting together will be at the full council meetings rather than the subcommittee meetings. I'm thinking of the difference between and the balance between kind of substantive work, but then just staying up to date on new information and reports and learning together, and having the opportunity to ask questions and be in discussion, just so that we're staying on top of um, fresh and emerging information. It makes me think that as a steering committee, we probably want to give some thought to, not just the kind of orders of business that require decisions, but how we bake in kind of updates and presentations for discussion to those council meetings, and kind of leave open the opportunity for subcommittees if there is kind of um, a new report or effort or initiative that is relevant to their work,
Yeah,
the
that makes a lot
opportunity
of
for them
sense
to
too.
have
Yeah.
meetings that just are kind of
Yeah.
updates, informational presentations, discussions, rather than kind of making recommendations.
That makes a ton of sense to me. Okay. Great. Kelly, last word on this, and then we need to pause. Yeah.
Yeah, one last thing too is keeping members engaged and like remembering that they're on a subcommittee, especially folks who aren't also counselors, is just another thing we might want to be thinking about in our subcommittees, just to have at least one meeting or something, just so people remember I'm on a subcommittee, I have a commitment, so that we don't struggle to get quorum every time we do meet, because it's like so rare or things like that,
Yeah.
if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So some flow of communication is helpful to keep people a lot, engaged. Um, but we just don't have much expectation of what the output of that is, right? Okay, we're kind of out of time. We had a quick conversation earlier amongst several of us about how to adapt to public meetings based on how it went last week and what we'll do today at lunchtime. If you have thoughts on that, could you just shoot an email to me and Jane, and we can sort that out. I think we have a good plan, do basically the same, but a little more time limited on the first Q&A and discussion point, so we have more time at the end for that kind of discussion with the public. That was the big takeaway. But please shoot us an email if you have some thoughts about how to do things today at lunchtime. Um, and then public comment, I always want to leave just a moment if anybody's been joining us today and has something important to say about the content. This is a great time to do it. So anyone who's not a steering committee member, Matthew.
Yes, and thank you. I was just going to say that bring those questions up before our subcommittees, and I'm a member of the transition subcommittee. Thank you, Kelly Klein, for bringing that up. About having us the frequency that I'm thinking about that might be advised to keep us in the loop for once a month, than trying to do it every half year, because once you do it once a month, it's fresh on your mind, and we're not trying to forget anything. We'll be able to, if we have something to say, we can say right there and then. So for public comment, I'm thinking, if we start this, up again, um, the transition subcommittees, but also the science and data committees, other committees within the subcommittees of the Vermont Climate Council, I think it would be for us would be preferable to not just be in having that public forwarding public engagement, but also thinking about, I think you might want to up it to at least once a month. So we're not like we're falling off the sideways. Then we're forgetting about the members that got us this far. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate the comment. Okay. Anything else from folks who are listening in? Okay. I think that's it. I think we did it all. Thanks, everyone. Have a very happy Monday. Stay tuned for an email from Jane when the document's up posted. And contact Jane directly. Please don't CC all of us because then we run into trouble. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week. Take care.